The Gathering of Stars. The crystalline chandeliers of Lady Zthoria's orbital mansion cast dancing rainbows across the marble floors, each refraction worth more than most humans would earn in a lifetime. The space station Elysium Prime orbited majestically above Terra Nova, the most prestigious human colony outside the solar system, its gleaming hull reflecting the distant stars. Lady Zthoria Dragoness adjusted her position on the platinum dais, her obsidian scales catching the light like captured starfire. The nanogems embedded beneath her skin pulsed with a soft blue glow, a display of wealth that could purchase entire city districts. Her serpentine eyes, ancient and calculating, surveyed the gathering with the patience of a predator who had never known hunger. Another successful charity gala, wouldn't you agree, Ambassador Jackson? She lifted her crystal goblet filled with bioluminescent nectar, her voice carrying the melodic undertones that made draconian speech so hypnotic. Ambassador Rock, his expensive exosuit adjusting automatically to his movements, raised his own glass. The Foundation for Underprivileged Species raised 8 million credits tonight. Quite satisfactory indeed. The irony wasn't lost on Elena Reed as she glided between the guests, her service uniform pristine but invisible to those she served. For 15 Earth years, she had worked as Lady Zthoria's personal attendant, cleaning the 15,000-square-foot orbital mansion, preparing specialized meals that accommodated draconian digestive requirements, and raising her son Marcus alone on a service worker's salary. The dragons had arrived 70 years ago, not as conquerors but as business partners. Their advanced technology had lifted humanity to the stars, opening trade routes across 17 systems. In return, they gained access to Earth's resources and what they called humanity's quaint cultural artifacts. The relationship was symbiotic, they claimed, but Elena knew better. Dragons owned the corporations that employed humans. Dragons lived in orbital mansions while humans crowded into habitation blocks. And dragons never let anyone forget who was superior. Near the refreshment table, 17-year-old Marcus Reed moved with quiet efficiency, his dark eyes reflecting the orbital lights like captured galaxies. His mother had secured him this temporary position, hoping it might lead to permanent employment. What Elena didn't know was that her son had been studying far more than the standard curriculum at his public education center. As Marcus refilled another diplomat's glass, he caught fragments of conversation, trade agreements worth billions, mining rights on distant worlds, the casual disposal of human workers who had outlived their usefulness. Each word was filed away in his exceptional memory, another piece of a puzzle he'd been assembling for years. Lady Zthoria's wings rustled as she noticed the young human. A cruel smile played across her features, revealing teeth that could bite through starship hull plating. An idea for entertainment had just occurred to her, something to amuse her guests and remind everyone of the natural order. "You there, boy," she called out, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade through silk. "Come here." The challenge. Marcus approached with measured steps, his posture perfect despite the weight of dozens of superior gazes upon him. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched her son walk into what could only be a trap. "Yes, Lady Zthoria," Marcus said, his voice steady and respectful. The Dragoness gestured toward an ornate table in the corner of the grand hall. The surface shimmered to life, revealing a holographic chess board unlike anything found in the habitation blocks. The pieces glowed with intricate detail, a three-dimensional game of strategy that had become the ultimate test of intellect across the known systems. "How about showing us how they play Holochess in the habitation blocks?" Lady Zthoria's question drew chuckles from the surrounding guests. "I've always been curious about how simpler minds approach the game." Elena tensed, her serving tray trembling in her grip. She caught her son's eye, giving him the smallest shake of her head. "Don't make a scene," her expression pleaded. "We need this job." Marcus, however, simply bowed his head slightly. "I would be honored, Lady Zthoria." The Dragoness seemed pleased with his compliance. "Excellent. I bet you've never played on a quantum projection board like this one. Each piece is worth more than your mother's yearly salary." Darius Hamilton, CEO of Orion Transport Enterprises, leaned toward his wife with a smirk. I bet he doesn't even know the night projector moves in a three-dimensional L shape. More laughter rippled through the gathering. Most dragons considered humans intellectually inferior, particularly those from the lower economic strata. The idea of a service worker's child playing Holochess against a draconian wasn't just absurd, it was insulting. "Elena," Lady Zthoria called out sweetly, "you may pause your duties. I want you to watch your offspring attempt to play. It will be educational for both of you." Elena moved to the side of the room, her eyes never leaving her son. There was something in Marcus's demeanor that made a few of the sharper guests stop laughing, a stillness like the space between stars before a supernova. As Lady Zthoria settled her massive form into a specially designed lounger, her wings folded elegantly behind her, she gestured to the glowing board. "I always play the stellar faction. It's a family tradition." In Holochess, players chose between stellar forces, represented by various celestial bodies and phenomena, and void forces, represented by cosmic abstractions and dark matter constructs. Traditional chess had been transformed into a game that incorporated gravitational pulls, event horizons, and dimensional shifts. Marcus nodded without comment and took his place opposite the Dragoness. His fingers hovered over the holographic pieces, not quite touching them as the board recognized his presence and configured itself to his biometric signature. "Let's make this interesting," Lady Zthoria announced to her guests. "If the boy manages to last more than 10 moves, I'll donate 1,000 credits to his district's education center." She paused for effect. "They can probably use it to fix their outdated neural interfaces." The laughter that followed had a cruel edge to it. Marcus remained still, but Elena saw something familiar in her son's eyes, the same gleam he'd had at 9 years old when he told her he would someday show everyone who they really were. Lady Zthoria initiated the game with a standard opening move, sliding her solar prominence piece forward. The Helios Gambit, dear boy. A classic opening we dragons learn as hatchlings. Marcus responded instantly, moving his void remnant to counter. The holographic piece glided smoothly across the board, leaving a trail of simulated dark matter in its wake. An awkward silence fell over the nearest guests. "That wasn't the move of a novice. The tide turns." "Interesting," murmured Ambassador Talia Vin, her cybernetic eye whirring softly as it zoomed in on the board. The human diplomat was one of the few who had earned genuine respect from the draconian elite, and her attention made several guests lean forward with sudden interest. Lady Zthoria hesitated for 3 seconds, long enough for Marcus to confirm his suspicion that she had memorized opening sequences but didn't truly understand the gravitational principles behind them. She moved her neutron slider diagonally, a textbook response that any academy student would recognize. Marcus's counter was immediate and devastating. His dark matter construct swept across the board in a move that should have been impossible, exploiting a quantum uncertainty principle that most players never discovered. The piece phased through Lady Zthoria's stellar wind defense and positioned itself in what the dragons called the throne position, a strategic point that controlled 3-dimensional axes simultaneously. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the holographic projectors. "How did you?" Lady Zthoria's voice caught. She stared at the board, her ancient eyes narrowing as she processed the implications of Marcus's move. This wasn't luck. This was mastery. Marcus spoke for the first time since the game began, his voice carrying a quiet confidence that made several dragons shift uncomfortably. The Erebus Paradox. Most players focus on the stellar movements and forget that void forces operate outside normal spacetime constraints. Elena's mouth went dry. Where had her son learned advanced Holochess theory? His public education center barely had functioning neural interfaces, let alone quantum strategy databases. Lady Zthoria recovered her composure, but Marcus caught the telltale flicker of her nictitating membranes, a draconian stress response. She moved her stellar crown forward, attempting to establish control over the center of the board. Marcus responded with a sequence of moves that left the assembled elite speechless. His void constructs danced across multiple dimensions, each placement forcing Lady Zthoria into increasingly defensive positions. What had begun as entertainment was becoming something else entirely, a demonstration of tactical brilliance that shouldn't have been possible from a human, let alone a child from the habitation blocks. Magnificent, whispered Dr. Kepler, the renowned draconian strategist. His scales had shifted to a deep blue, a sign of intellectual excitement rarely seen in his species. The boy is playing 5 moves ahead. He's not just seeing the board, he's seeing the mathematical poetry behind it. By the 15th move, Lady Zthoria was visibly struggling. Sweat beaded on her scaled brow as she faced positions she'd never encountered in any training simulation. Marcus had moved beyond conventional strategy into something approaching art. "Your move, Lady Zthoria," Marcus said quietly, gesturing to the board where her stellar forces were being systematically dismantled by the elegant dance of his void fleet. The Dragoness stared at the holographic display, her proud features tight with frustration and something else, fear. For the first time in her 300-year lifespan, she was facing an opponent who made her feel intellectually inferior. Around them, the party had transformed into something resembling a scientific symposium. Dragons, humans, and other species pressed closer, studying each move with the intensity of scholars witnessing a breakthrough. Even the serving staff had stopped their duties to watch. Elena realized she was holding her breath. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for Marcus, but for how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. Lady Zthoria reached for her quantum bishop, hesitated, then pulled back. She tried 3 different pieces before finally making a move that everyone in the room could see was a mistake. Marcus smiled for the first time that evening. "Checkmate in 7 moves," he announced calmly. "Would you like me to show you the sequence, or would you prefer to discover it yourself?" Revelations. The silence stretched across the grand hall like the void between galaxies. Lady Zthoria's scales had shifted to a dull gray, a color that dragons displayed only in moments of profound shock or defeat. Her claws clicked against the table's surface as she studied the board, searching for an escape that didn't exist. "Impossible," she whispered, but even as the word left her lips, she could see the inevitable cascade of moves that would lead to her defeat. Each of Marcus's pieces was positioned with mathematical precision, creating a web of consequences that would tighten with every move she made. Dr. Kepler stepped forward, his own analytical mind racing through the possibilities. "Young human," he said, his voice filled with something approaching reverence, "where did you learn to play like this? These aren't techniques taught in any academy I know of." Marcus looked up from the board, meeting the distinguished dragon's gaze without flinching. "I taught myself, sir. We may not have quantum projection boards in the habitation blocks, but we do have access to the public archives. Every game ever played, every strategy ever developed, it's all there if you know how to look." Elena felt her world tilting. Her son had spent countless hours in his room with what she'd assumed were simple educational programs. She'd never imagined he was studying Grandmaster-level Holochess theory. But the computational complexity, Ambassador Vin interjected, her cybernetic eye flickering with rapid calculations. Processing that much strategic data would require enhanced neural interfaces, quantum processors. "Or time," Marcus said simply. "Lots of time, and a very good memory." He gestured to the board where Lady Zthoria was still frozen in analysis paralysis. "Dragons live for centuries, so you've never had to develop the human talent for rapid learning. We get maybe 80 years if we're lucky, so we learn to absorb information faster, see patterns more quickly." A murmur ran through the crowd. Several dragons exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from fascination to concern. They were beginning to understand that they had fundamentally misunderstood their human partners. Lady Zthoria finally made her move, a desperate gambit that only delayed the inevitable. Marcus responded with casual efficiency, his void remnant sweeping across the board to eliminate her last defensive position. "You've been studying us," Lady Zthoria accused, her voice low and dangerous. "This isn't just about Holochess. You've been analyzing our strategies, our weaknesses." Marcus nodded calmly. "Every human who's ever worked for dragons has been studying you. We clean your homes, prepare your food, maintain your systems. Did you really think we weren't paying attention?" The implications of his words sent ripples of unease through the assembled elite. They were beginning to realize that their simple, human servants might not be as simple as they'd assumed. "What else have you discovered?" Dr. Kepler asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his species' natural arrogance. Marcus made his final move, and the holographic board erupted in a cascading light show that marked a decisive victory. Lady Zthoria's stellar forces collapsed into themselves like a dying star, while his void constructs expanded to fill the empty space. "I've discovered that intelligence isn't about processing power or genetic enhancement," Marcus said as the light show faded. "It's about adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to learn from every experience, even defeat." He stood and bowed respectfully to Lady Zthoria. "Thank you for the game, my lady. It was educational for both of us." The Dragoness stared at him for a long moment, her ancient eyes reflecting something that might have been newfound respect. When she finally spoke, her voice carried none of its earlier condescension. "What do you intend to do with this education, young Marcus Reed?" "A new game begins." Marcus looked around the room, meeting the eyes of dragons, humans, and other species alike. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had just fundamentally shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. "I intend to make sure that the next generation of humans doesn't have to learn in secret," he said. "We've proven tonight that given the opportunity, human minds can compete with anyone. The question is whether our dragon partners are wise enough to recognize that partnership works best when both sides are allowed to reach their full potential." Dr. Kepler's scales had shifted to a brilliant blue-green, the color of intellectual excitement mixed with profound respect. "You're proposing a change to the entire social structure of 17 systems." "I'm proposing that we stop pretending one species is naturally superior to another," Marcus replied. "Dragons have technology and longevity. Humans have adaptability and innovation. Instead of one serving the other, why not truly work together?" Elena stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride and terror in equal measure. Her son had just challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization, and she could see in the faces around them that some were listening. Lady Zthoria remained silent for several minutes, her ancient mind processing the implications of what she'd witnessed. Finally, she stood, her massive form towering over the assembly. "Marcus Reed," she said formally, "I offer you a position in my household, not as a servant, but as a strategic advisor. Your insights could be valuable." "Thank you, Lady Zthoria, but I must decline," Marcus said with perfect politeness. "I've already accepted a position elsewhere." The room buzzed with confusion. Elsewhere? What could a 17-year-old human possibly have lined up that was better than serving in a draconian noble house? Marcus smiled, and for the first time that evening, he looked his age, a teenager who had just pulled off the greatest prank in galactic history. "Dr. Kepler contacted me 3 months ago through encrypted channels. Apparently, my analysis papers on quantum strategic theory had been circulating in certain academic circles. He offered me a full scholarship to the Andromeda Institute of Advanced Sciences." Dr. Kepler's rumbling chuckle filled the room. "The boy submitted his application under a false identity. We had no idea he was human until tonight. His theoretical work on multidimensional strategy was so advanced that we assumed he was a postgraduate dragon scholar." Elena gasped. The Andromeda Institute was the most prestigious academic institution in the galaxy. Dragons waited centuries for admission. "But I'm not going alone," Marcus continued, his gaze finding his mother across the room. "Part of my acceptance was conditional on establishing a new program, one designed to identify and nurture exceptional talent regardless of species or economic background. We're calling it the Human Potential Project." The implications were staggering. If successful, it would mean human children from across the 17 systems would have access to education previously reserved for Dragon Elite. Ambassador Vin was the first to break the stunned silence. "The political ramifications alone will be managed," Dr. Kepler interrupted smoothly. "The Institute operates under science charter, not political mandate. We go where the research leads us, regardless of social conventions. Lady Zthoria watched this exchange with growing amusement. The cunning she'd spent centuries developing told her that she was witnessing the beginning of a new era. The smart play wasn't to fight the change, but to be among the first to profit from it. Dr. Kepler, she said formally, the Dragoness Foundation would like to contribute to this human potential project. Shall we say, 10 million credits to start? The old dragon's eyes sparkled with understanding. Most generous, Lady Zthoria. I'm sure young Marcus will make excellent use of such resources. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Elena found herself standing beside her son on the observation deck, watching Terra Nova rotate slowly beneath them. How long have you been planning this? She asked quietly. Since I was 9, Marcus admitted. The night you came home crying because Lady Zthoria had humiliated you in front of her guests. You said I should never let anyone make me feel small just because of what I was born as. Elena remembered that night, one of many when the casual cruelty of their employers had driven her to tears. She'd never imagined her words would plant seeds that would grow into something like this. What happens now? She asked. Marcus smiled, his eyes reflecting the stars that would soon be within reach of any human child brilliant enough to grasp them. Now we prove that the only difference between a dragon and a human is the opportunities we're given to soar. As mother and son stood together watching the galaxy turn, neither noticed Dr. Kepler and Lady Zthoria deep in conversation near the mansion's main entrance. Both ancient beings had lived long enough to recognize a turning point in history when they saw one. The age of assumed draconian superiority was ending. The age of true partnership, built on mutual respect and shared achievement, was about to begin. And it had all started with a simple game of Holochess. The end.